Hey everybody, welcome back to What's Next. Today we got the season finale of Moonlight, Gods
Finally.
and Monsters, episode 6. And as always, I'm joined here with the founder of the Circle Club, Tyrone, my main man. How you doing today?
Great, man. This series has been up, down, all around. Don't know how I feel. Like it's one of those classic Marvel things where you're watching this and while you're watching it, you're just like, I don't think I like this. And then they do something, you're like, I do like this, but I don't like the direction of the plot. And so in this season finale, I think it did exactly the same thing with that. And, per usual, they leave us dangling and hanging. But, overall, I think the series was okay. It was good. I see a lot of people hyping this up, like hyping it up. And I'm like, yo, let's reel this in. And then that's the thing about me and Corey is, he may love it, I may hate it, vice versa. We give our own opinions on these things, and we're just going to tell you how it is. We're not going to tell you, what the majority's thinking. We're just going to see, this is what we see happening on the screen, and this is how we're reacting to it. And that's why you guys got to make sure you listen up to what's next. If you're listening via audio, you can go ahead and check us out on YouTube to get the video version. But yeah, we always try to keep these takes real, and that's exactly what we're gonna do. So Corey, let's just jump into it. What were your thoughts on the season finale of Moonlight season 1?
Season finale, specifically this episode, I did enjoy the episode mostly, right? I think there was a couple elements I didn't really like. I liked how they really wrapped up Mark and Steven coming together. That's one thing I talked about in their abilities. In foreshadowing them later on in the show coming together so that their abilities as Moonlight could be more easy flowing, I guess is the best way to put it, right? More in sync, right? And you see that in their last battle and them just continuously being able to kind of bounce between one another, right? Is really cool. I love that aspect. That's something I really, really wanted to see. Something I didn't really like. I really didn't like how everything just happened so quickly. This is the concern we had kind of over the last few episodes, seeing a lot of backstory, and it's like, okay, we only have one episode left, right? Like, how are you going to wrap this all up?
Right.
And I felt like it all just kind of got wrapped up in a bow way too easily.
And
some holes that were left there.
And just to jump in real quick, like I kind of felt like it was a bit bizarre that when they were in the tomb, right? Layla is making noise. She clearly kills one of Arthur's men, and like they just don't even approach her. And like, I think at that point maybe Arthur's kind of like, it doesn't matter because I've won. But it doesn't seem very Arthur Harrow, who kind of seems like he was a step ahead of everyone, to not even take action on that. And so it kind of felt like they just kind of gave her the ability to get through that situation so that she can eventually free Mark and not be discovered. And it all just happened so easily. And then you've been saying all season, I think Layla's going to get an avatar. And even that kind of felt a bit rushed. Like, okay, whoa, who is this? Why should she trust her? Why would she do this? She's seen all the sketchy skepticism of the gods. And that's another thing that I find really weird too, is like, you think that the gods would like, the secrecy of it all and them not trusting humans and banishing themselves, all this stuff, you would think that there'd be a little bit of a hesitation to even trust Layla or vice versa. But she just jumps into it. She becomes an avatar. It looks cool. You can't deny that. But I just felt it happened really quickly. Now, a positive spin from that, I would say, right, is we've talked about how there's multiple ways to get superhero powers, right? You're born with it. You have gadgets. There's the X-Men where it's like, you fall into radioactive whatever. But this is a new way, this avatar thing, to give the humans powers. So that was one thing that I particularly loved about the show in general, and particularly in this episode. It was cool to see, okay, Layla was just a part-time superhero there, but if that, if it ever came to be where we needed her, she could do that.
Yeah, I did like that, right? Like I will give myself a quick little pat on the back because I did say she was going to become an avatar.
Yeah.
The only issue I have with it is that they make it seem like these gods already have avatars. So why did the hippo goddess not already have one, right? Why, like, where, what has she been doing this whole time, right?
Right.
Your point, where like there was one comment she made where she was like, oh, like your dad would love this, right? And it's like, what's with Layla's dad? Like, you guys keep making a big deal about Layla's dad, and like, really, all he is Sam Witwicky's grandfather in Transformers. That's it. He's just a backstory character. You guys talk about him too much. I don't want to hear about him anymore.
And,
right?
and let me add to that too, bro. Is like, so, and this is my like, I know we're just focused on the season finale here, but when they announced, they said Moonlight is going to be one season or whatever. I think Disney needs to really, we don't care, like if there's going to be season 1, 2, 3. You let us know up front, because the way they position some of these other shows feels like they're mini series or limited series. And we talked offline how like a Chernobyl, right? Or the chess one. What's that girl?
Queen's Gambit.
Queen's Gambit. Thank you. It's like that happens, it's done, and it feels beginning, middle, end. This felt like it was always going to be a season 2, right? It just felt like they weren't giving us the full story. They weren't giving us a full meat because they wanted to linger. And what we've seen in these other movies is that, okay, the characters become one, or they have this new identity. Wanda becomes, the Scarlet Witch. Sam becomes Captain America. And then here we see Mark and Steven become one. They become Moon Knight, essentially, kind of, a little bit. And it just felt like here at the end that we just kind of got lost, right? We just kind of got lost, and it felt like, okay, this is not going to be just one season, right? There's no way. And then when you throw in the fact that there's a post-credit scene, that post-credit scene almost felt like it could have been an ending for this for this episode, and to give us maybe 2, 3, 4 more episodes. And to your point, rather than them trying to smush this all together in 6 episodes, I think we would have much rather seen this spread apart. Give us less costume, less cinematography, all that. If it's a budgetary reason, and give us some more of that meat, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think that's one thing. The post-credit scene is going to be something I'm going to reference a lot here, because I think for me, I really loved the post-credit scenes. I have no problems with the post-credit scenes, but I think it alleviated some of the concerns I had leaving the episode too, right? So, for example, one of the biggest issues I have with this series in general is the lack of expressing that third altar, right? And where I've kind of landed at, to our point of like needing a second season, is I feel like this whole journey we've been on has been really about Mark and Steven getting on the same page and uniting and being in sync, right? And there's still that other altar out there that they're completely unaware of, right? So like, what is that dynamic going to be like? If any indication of what Mark and Steven's relationship was like, clearly it's going to be messed up, right? Because not only are they unaware of who Jake is willing to cross that line, right? So how much is that fight gonna be, or what is that dynamic gonna look like when Steve and Mark are trying to unite and sync with Jake, right? I think there's just so much question there. And then it brings into question Khonshu, right? Where Khonshu clearly manipulated Mark last episode to be his avatar, right? And when Layla tries to go release Khonshu really doesn't even care about Mark, right? He's like, oh, like you'd be a great suitable avatar. And she's like, I don't want to be your avatar, right? Right. Then he ends up realizing that Mark's alive and he needs Mark to be able to beat Amit. He can't just do it on his own. So he goes back there, and then with the post-credit scene, he almost is like jokingly talking about how I don't need Mark or Steven, I have Jake.
Right. Yeah.
There's just like this weird dynamic about the whole show was to stop Amit and for Mark and Steven to become one, right? So Mark and Steven became one, but there's still really not a whole because they have a third altar out there. Yeah. And the whole purpose was to stop Amit, who is prejudging people and doing wrong things. And the whole thing that we liked about Khonshu is that like he's punishing the bad people, right? He's only doing bad things to the people that deserve it, right? And now he's being shown as really a manipulator, right? Like even to this point, he said, yeah, I'll let you go, Mark and Steven. I'll honor the deal. And then he's almost sitting in the back of a limo like, haha, like I'm still getting away with it. Right. So like how bad is Khonshu in this too? What is this whole dynamic going to look like? Because even though we got Mark and Steven on the same page, this whole character really isn't on the same page right now. It's still chaos, right? Yeah. Which with a disorder like that, I mean, there's going to be some chaos, but it's still the whole aspect of like, not enough episodes, not enough meat there. Like, I just really don't understand how you send this character off to the larger MCU.
Yeah.
Given where we've been left off here,
I feel like it
needs a season 2. It has to be like on its own still.
There's no, I don't see how Moon Knight could really enter the Force, and it almost makes me think or feel about like timeline and placing of this. This may be taking place after Black Panther, after Thor: Love and Thunder, after Doctor Strange. Like all of this, honestly, like it could be taking place after all of these events, and honestly, maybe not even the same universe, right? We've talked about how we think, like, our theory, or my theory at least, is that the Marvel we've been watching for a long time isn't the true story or the main storyline, but we've been so accustomed to believe it is, because now you see in Loki, with What If, some of these different concepts that can be introduced. One thing that kind of made me think about what you said there is the role of the gods. And I kind of think we have this interpretation of gods being, better than man, and, they're all-knowing and wise. It kind of seems like to me that they're almost just as similar to humans. They just have these super abilities, because and the thing that points that most to me is when we see Steven go back, we see Mark go back for Steven, right, in the field of reeds. It, like, logically, the first thing I thought of was like, okay, if the hippo told you don't do that or you're gonna get stuck, it's like Mark should have been like, oh shoot, I can't go, or it's not gonna work, right? Like logically, that's what you would think. You wouldn't risk your life because it's like, okay, well then Steven died for nothing. He goes and does it anyways. It happens to work out where Steven is free, and you hear Miss Hippo, what's her name? I gotta stop saying Miss Hippo.
Tawaret.
Excuse me, what was it?
Tawaret.
Yeah, I can't pronounce it, that's why. But she says, Osiris, it seems like you gotten a little soft on us here, right? And so Osiris lets them go. He sees that they've changed, they're quote unquote balanced. And so I think even though there are rules with the gods, it seems like they're not like as like strict and sudden. And we even see that with Amit, where Amit's like, Arthur goes, hey, I'm imbalanced. You have to sacrifice me. It is what it is to serve the greater purpose, or I'm going to create issues. And Amit's like, no, I need you for the good word, my brother. I need you to be there. And so I think that the gods are just as human as humans, honestly. And I think that they aren't as strict about the rules and the order of things. They're willing to bend things.
And this is where I think Thor: Love and Thunder comes in. And I know this is an episode 6 review of Moonlight, but this is where I think I get a lot of similarities to WandaVision with the show and how the show was delivered, right? Mm-hmm. I think they're in very similar boats in how I feel coming out of the show, right? And I feel like WandaVision really set up a lot of what we're going to see probably coming into Doctor Strange tomorrow. However, with these Egyptian gods, it's really getting across a lot of that foundation with these gods before Thor: Love and Thunder, and they aren't always right. They are wrong at times. You see that with Amit, you see that with Khonshu, right? You see that with how the Egyptian gods handled the trial between Khonshu and Arthur, right? Mm-hmm. And how all these things happen, right? So the gods aren't perfect, right? And them being more hands-off leads to these problems. And I think we can't look at them as perfection, right? It kind of almost goes back to like why people in real life say like man is made in God's image, right?
Right.
Like,
yes.
There is an aspect to the freedom that we're given, right? And a lot of times, not to get religious with it, but like that's what a lot of Christian culture is like, right? God isn't meant to intervene, right?
Right.
He gave you the will. He gave you that free choice, right? Yeah. So these Egyptian gods not intervening, right, until these moments that absolutely they have to, right, is what I think leads to issues with like Gore the God Butcher that we'll end up seeing. But to take it a couple steps back and keep it in the wheelhouse of Moonlight, the problem I have with a lot of these things is too like things we saw in Eternals, right, with the big celestial coming out of Earth. We just saw Khonshu and Amit like the size of the Empire State Building fighting,
right?
Like, how does this affect the larger MCU, right? And I think this is what always needs to be talked about when we're talking about these Marvel properties. This is why we're watching these shows. It's for the interconnected story, right? At the end of the day, I need to understand how this character is getting added to that story and what has been done to get him ready for that larger story. And I think a problem with the show, beyond all the cool concepts and things that they've added, is I do not feel like this character is ready to go off to that larger MCU. And it just feels like it's a little out of place with the MCU and where it's at right now.
Yeah.
I feel like the MCU in general is in this spot right now.
And I think that's really why the multiverse thing is going to be so big, because I think we may not be watching something that is in that MCU timeline that we're accustomed to. And I just want to say one quick thing about, there's us as the audience, and then there's a Marvel audience that's inside the movies, right? The real people of the real life and stuff, and like everyday people. And you see a lot of that in Hawkeye, where it's like there are real people reacting to things. There's plays. I think that's probably one of the best versions of us seeing that. And it will be interesting to see, okay, like you said, with the Eternals and this, how do people react to that? Like there's a lot of crazy stuff going on that's, not just an alien. And as ridiculous as that sounds, like an alien coming to Earth seems like a pretty big deal, but like in the context of Marvel and what we've seen so far, it really isn't that big of a deal. And so that is something that I'm very curious to see next as well. Let's just jump into this before we head out of this situation. What were some of the key things that you saw? Because we talk a lot about how there were some great concepts that we saw in this, right? And that you can take from this, despite what you may think of the plot, all that. And we didn't talk about the acting, but obviously Oscar Isaac just crushed it. Like just to play two characters, like with yourself, and to have those mannerisms down, and like just there's not a lot to be said about it. He just nailed it, right? But when we talk about the concepts, right, like we get to see zombies, we get to hear about the afterlife. Like, tell me some of those concepts that you think were really cool that were brought up.
Things that I really, really loved. I love the aspect of the avatars. I think that goes without being said. We've mentioned it numerous times, right? Just a new way that people can get superpowers was intriguing to me, right? I think the aspect, and this is going to play again into Thor Love and Thunder, but the aspect of all these different higher entities potentially being real across the entire board, I think is cool for that inclusion and diversity that we always talk about, that Disney is really trying to promote right now. Right? They're really trying to make sure everybody is accepting of it. But I think it's cool, not even just from that aspect, but more so just okay, what else is out there, right? Like what other gods are out there that we haven't seen? What like other higher entities
Zeus,
are out there that
Vishnu, right? I mean,
like so many different. I mean, there's again, it's so many different people's beliefs nowadays, that there's so many different ones that we could have.
And to your point, like that's so cool to see as well. It's like, the Hindu god Vishnu, like chilling with Zeus, right? And then there's Jesus down the street. Like now we're talking about like natural diversity being brought upon, and because like we've seen a lot of that diversity with the superheroes, and obviously there's always room for more, but to now talk about who their beliefs and like what their beliefs are, and like to be like, their beliefs are real, like these are things that actually happen, that's pretty cool. I agree with you.
Third thing I really loved is just the quick flash, because it was very quick. Again, like we said, this episode happened very fast, but how Moon Knight's powers work when he is on the same page as somebody, right? We haven't fully seen him with Jake in there yet, but watching him bounce back and forth seamlessly with Mark and Steven in the Moonlight suit was impeccable to watch. That's something that I really wanted to happen. That's something I thought was going to happen. So seeing it actually come to fruition was amazing to see. I think beyond that, the important thing to talk about, always the visuals.
On that too, right? Before you saw that, like they're both kind of like, whoa, what's that suit? Like that's not the suit that I have. And now that they're in sync and they're one, like they have that ability to snap and switch. And I think that is just so dope. Like we haven't seen something like that yet in the Marvel universe where someone can just switch like that. So, and it shows too that there's different ways to be successful as a superhero. You can have your fist, you can have your intelligence, you can have a combination of both. So that's also just really exciting. And then you just said the visuals.
Visuals are impeccable, honestly, in the show, from the Moonlight scenes to when they change the sky, the pyramid, a lot of great visuals in this. He plays right into that, even suit changing. The ability to just even make that happen on screen, of seeing him swap between these suits as he's running, unreal. Kudos to Disney for the visuals on this.
And we talked about this offline that, you know, I think the reason we didn't see so much of Moonlight is probably because that's such a complex, like, visual thing to pull off. Like with an Iron Man suit, it's metal, right? So it's not moving a whole ton, but this is almost more mummified. And so, like, it's moving in the air, you know, there's flailing parts to it. And you got to make sure that the lighting hits right on that, the shadows are correct. Otherwise it looks kind of cheesy when it comes across. So it just, and we've talked about this before the series even started. You guys can go watch our trailer over on the Circle Club YouTube channel. That, like, this was always going to be a visual masterpiece, just to see some of these things. And that first episode felt so much like a movie. It really set the tone for the rest of the show. And then, you know, speaking of mummification, to see zombies, right? Or mummies for the first time, like, that was pretty dope too, because now we know, oh, okay, so we're kind of starting to get into that Blade world where there's going to be vampires and other things, and how does Marvel actually execute that? Because with a mummy, is it just dumb? It doesn't have a purpose. Is there functionality? And to see just a hint of that kind of felt like Marvel and Disney's way of being like, hey, we got something in store for you down the line. So I'm very excited to see what they do with that. And honestly too, like, you think about the Eternals, right? Like, we haven't seen like fairies or that kind of thing, pixies or whatever in this world. So it's going to become like, or trolls. So it's like, now we're going to start to see some of these more mythical fantasy, Lord of the Ring type beat things. So I'm just really excited for that. I think that was one of the, like, bigger takeaways too.
Yeah, now let's flip the script here. Let's flip that switch to the thing that we love doing as some massholes.
Yeah.
What are the things you hated about this show, Tyrone?
Honestly, I kind of felt like there was either too much or not enough of Arthur Harrow. Like, Arthur was kind of walking around like he was the big dick on campus, and, like, I didn't really feel like he was. Like, he kind of felt like he was saying that, but I was like, why? Why is it? And I think that's the thing with this show too, right? Is that it's almost the Rick and Morty effect, where there's so much happening off the screen, and then you just jump into an adventure that you're kind of like, okay, I guess Arthur's supposed to be bad. He seems bad, and they kind of all seem intimidated by him. So let's all just, you know, we should be weary of him. But I think it would have been kind of nice to maybe potentially see why he is that bad. That was the first one that came to my mind. How about you?
First thing that comes to my mind is the lack of the third altar until really a post-credit scene. You know, like I talked about earlier, how much I love the post-credit scene. I hate how we had to wait so long to visually actually get the third altar, right? I think playing into that, the thing I don't like is a lot of this show to me was about the journey in making Mark and Steven one and coming to terms with their reality. And I feel like they kind of left off the show with like a, hey, yeah, we are in sync now. We are on the same page. And it's like, wait a minute, you just admitted this whole time, or teased this whole time, that there was a third altar. Now at the post-credit scene, you admit there's actually a third altar. So this man really hasn't come to terms with his reality. He really hasn't come to full conclusion with it. So how, going to point out a plot hole, how did he become one or become okay to go to the field of reeds when they haven't even addressed this third altar, right? Like, it makes no sense at all.
It almost makes me feel, it doesn't make like psychological sense that it would be this way, because only the host can create another altar when we're talking about DID. But it almost makes me feel like maybe somehow Khonshu created this third altar for them. But again, that's not really how it works. But like, to your point, like, you would think that they would have to be maybe settled, but I don't know, like, just going through that institution, and
He might have though, because
Yeah.
remember when, I mean, it's hard to take Arthur's word for anything because he's the bad guy in this.
Yeah.
But like Arthur even says that Khonshu is manipulating a fractured mind. And I think he even says at some point, like, I don't know about verbatim how he says it, but he alludes to maybe Khonshu is the reason why his mind is even broken. So to your point there, where like, I think they clearly didn't answer it, right? Did Mark create this person? Did Steven create this person? And by person I mean alter.
Yeah.
But the way it makes it seem is like maybe it is Khonshu who created them, because based on everything you just showed me, Mark and Steven just became one, right? And they're very not aware of who Jake is, right?
Yeah.
Where before Mark admits he was aware who Steven was, right? He knew he created Steven. So did Khonshu make Jake Lockley? And that just is questionable to me, because now you're really taking an actual disorder
right
in real life
and playing with it too much,
like kind of manipulating how it actually is, right?
Right. Because
I think that was something I was always concerned about, is how you're portraying this disorder. I think they were doing a very good job of it a lot of times, but that point I just made, I think does it a disservice if Khonshu made that third altar, but also to the point of
what I'm gonna say to maybe before you get your point back is, I think so the point of an altar, right, is to create a protective state for the master host. And I think, like, what I'm thinking in the back of my head is, I'm like, all right, if Khonshu is this manipulative, all this stuff, how can Mark and Steven really exist and have this Moonlight power and suit if Khonshu is ultimately manipulating him or a bad guy? It just doesn't make sense, because I'm thinking like down the line with Marvel, right? Like at some point they're gonna have to come even Stevens with him, that way they're on the same page. And so I'm thinking right now in my head, maybe Khonshu, in order to protect Mark and Steven, created this other altar, or kind of push this third altar to come about in order to protect them from something else. Because I think ultimately you have to have a reason or something down the line where Mark and Steven are kind of like, Khonshu, how could you do this to me? Like, I can't believe this, blah, 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 blah. And then he's like, Mark, I had to do this to protect you. Otherwise, they could just say, all right, well, we're not going to have you be our avatar anymore. We're done. And then how do you continue that character to have his powers in suit, right? So there has to be some sort of balance or conclusion to how this came about. And I think that we're going to see this, maybe not season 2, maybe in a movie, I don't know. But again, and that kind of transitioned me into my other part, is that it all just wrapped up too quickly. It wasn't enough. And this was kind of advertised and marketed to us as like almost like a limited series, 6 episodes. And it just never really felt like this was going to be 6 episodes. Like even when you get to episode 2 or 3, you're kind of like, there's no shot this doesn't have 2 seasons at the least, right?
Yeah, I think one of the points I was going to make about the whole this DID, right? And like if Khonshu made, the problem I have with that is if Khonshu made that third altar, that's not how obviously DID works. Yeah. But also when they were in the afterlife, and Tawaret like alludes to the thing that you mentioned before, is like, no, Steven's gone. Like if you go back, you're gonna get trapped. It's like, no, that's like not how DID works. You don't just get rid of them, right? That's 2 aspects that I think is very touchy to even allude to with a disorder that's real in real life. So that's kind of some issue. Other than that, I thought they portrayed it very well in the real world, right? I think they did that really well. But
and honestly,
just
even
those 2 little tidbits,
Disney took a risk by showing that, like the actual trauma where his mom has a belt when she's beating him, like especially nowadays, you know, that's almost like killing a cat or dog, right? Like just to show that imagery. So that was really risky of them to do, but I think it was important to show, you know, like that is kind of like something that happens. And to your point, DID isn't something that can get solved. So that's how like I kind of knew in episode 5, I'm like, there's no shot that he's not gonna go back and fix him or somehow come together. But yeah, to your point, it's like if that would have been that, it would have been weird. But it's also a little touchy because it's like you said, like exterior person can't create another altar for you. However, an exterior action for something that could happen could create that, right? So that's why I'm sort of the belief, and maybe it was Mark or Steven, they didn't know. And, Steven just learned really about this other side of himself. So maybe he manipulated Steven, not Mark, and then became this third altar. And then when he became the third altar, he was like, you can't tell these other two about that.
I think this is where I think they can stick the landing, right? If they provide more context and content for us in regards to Moonlight, I think if they create, Jake was created by Mark as that initially in the past, like when they first were working with each other and they were doing all these missions, there was this line that needed to cross on this one of these first missions, right? And Mark wasn't really willing to do it, but because he agreed to the terms of their situation with Khonshu, right? That's where the conflict between him and Mark saying like, hey, okay, I'm gonna go get Layla as my avatar then. It's like, whoa, like no, right? So I think there's a mission there that may have been the first time that Mark needed to cross the line and didn't want to. And he created Jake to be that entity that would cross the line, that would do everything that Khonshu wants, ultimately because he knew Khonshu was going to go to Layla, right? And they didn't really show us that, give us any insight into that. No. But I think that could be the way you stick that landing and how Jake was created. But again, it goes back to, you're leaving us with more questions. This is supposed to be a limited series. I feel like we need a season 2,
There's definitely has to be a season 2. And the last point I'll make, we can wrap it up, is Layla herself, right? So there's all this like allusion to Mark and Layla's father. There was some history there that doesn't get touched upon. We see Layla herself kind of inserted into these this God stuff and Mark's story. You're kind of like, how can she just be like a passenger on this ride? Like, isn't this supposed to be some sort of secrecy behind this? And then just her story in general, and with Mark and Steven, it just felt like there was this love triangle thing that they started to do, but then they stopped and they didn't really get into it. I think ultimately that, when we wrap this up, I think there's a lot of brilliant concepts, great acting, great cinematography. We love the plot about, the DID stuff and him discovering himself. Honestly, this series probably would have been better, in my opinion, if they just focused solely on that, him getting his powers and how he becomes that, maybe. And then maybe season 2, you get more into this Amit Khonshu battle stuff. And it could have already happened or been there. And maybe just how we started this, where you're like, okay, it's been months or years or whatever after, and we just jump right into it. And then they start to unravel some of the onion layers of, hey, this is how we got here. I think that would have worked a little bit better for me. But overall, Corey, I think when we're talking about our, 5-score system, I think I would give this probably a 3.8 out of 5. Like, there was a lot of good stuff to talk about with this. And I liked a lot of it, but I just think some parts, the execution wasn't nailed, but when it was nailed, it felt very well done. You know what I'm saying? So I landed with 3.8 out of 5. How about you?
I think the 3.8 is a very fair score. I'm gonna ride that with you. I'm gonna hop on your coattails there. I think coming out of this show, the best example I could give it, I put it right into the WandaVision category. That's exactly where I think this lands, right? Some cool concepts, things I was interested in. Overall, felt like the show was really slow to start with, like sitcoms, going through the generations, things like that. But it was all about Wanda's journey, right? Going through her stages of grief. That's what the whole show is about, is her getting over that loss of vision, right?
Loss of vision, love, loss of her brother and all that. Yeah.
Loss of all that, right? So she was alone. And I feel like this show was about the disorder and Mark not being all there and the situation being chaotic and him needing to get back to reality, similar to Wanda, right? Needing to come back to reality in the situation at hand, right?
Yep.
And I think these two shows we're going to look back on and we're going to say, wow, they were very similar in a sense.
Yeah.
Everything that they were trying to do there, right? Similar blueprint. So yeah, I think 3.8 is a safe score, right? Not a great series, not a bad series, just a lot of cool stuff, but some problems there and some plot holes. So we'll see. They could wrap it up in the future. Who knows?
I'm gonna go ahead on the record and predict this. I think that when we look back at this series in 5 years, 3 years, whatever it is, I think we're gonna go, oh, they were laying out all this stuff. But as we're living in the moment, in the present, it's hard to really appreciate some of these decisions, I think. And I think that we're going to be able to, get that gratification later. But all right, that is us on what's next. Make sure you tune in because we got Doctor Strange. We get to watch it earlier than everyone else. So we'll have that out for you guys ASAP. If you're listening on Spotify, iTunes, wherever, give us a 5-star rating. Go follow us on social media. I'm the Circle Club. Corey will give his social in a second. Make sure you go follow us on YouTube and subscribe as well. Corey, let them know where they can find you, man.
Yeah, you guys can find me on TikTok, Instagram, or on YouTube. We're going to be uploading these audios as well. So you can catch the audio if you don't really care for the visuals. My @ is what's next _TCC, standing for the Circle Club, because we're a network over here. We're covering all bases. So if you're not just into superhero movies, go check out my main man above me, Tyrone. He will hold you down. So guys, thank you as always. Moonlight is all wrapped up now, but we will be back for Doctor Strange.
And that's what's next. Peace.